Okay, so hi, my name is Katie. I'm going to be showing um the how jazz music was a way of cultural identity during the Harlem Renaissance. Yeah. So I have the PowerPoint as well, for the presentation. So if you want to follow along. Um, so the overview of what the Harlem Renaissance was, the Harlem Renaissance was basically a time during the 1920s to 1930s, excuse me, when Black artists such as poets, artists, musicians, and um, had basically created a lot of powerful music, art, and writing, etc. It took place basically in Harlem, New York. During this time, there was a lot of creativity with Black culture and with as well as how they would embrace it and also demonstrating their identity. With that, they were able to change others' minds about how they were as individual people. So specifically as how they were viewed, especially because during the Harlem Renaissance, it was the time of how, people were moving from the South to West and yeah, I'll get more into that. I'll get more into depth with that in the next slide. So, the philosophy of why the Harlem Renaissance occurred, basically it had occurred because due to the combination of historical, social, and cultural factors, that converged in the early 20th century. So, there were key events and key factors of why the Harlem Renaissance did occur. So leading up to that, it was the Great Migration. The Great Migration involved basically in the 1916 to the 1970. Um, Basically an estimated of 6 million African Americans basically just migrated to the rural South to urban centers in the North. I said the West before. My bad. I meant the North. It's confusing. I don't know my compasses. But yeah, so that basically happened, and due to that, they were being discovered by African Americans seeking economic opportunities. So being able to grow in a way, being able to grow and not be living as much in poverty and not being treated as, slaves. Um, so basically, as well as escaping the Jim Crow laws, that was one of them. So Harlem's concentrated of Black talent and creativity basically fostered a vibrant culture seen throughout the town. So African American owned businesses, publications, music companies, theaters, nightclubs. Nightclubs were actually a big hit during the Harlem Renaissance. I'll explain later on. I'll explain later on why. And they were being enunciated throughout all Harlem, while also supporting their artistic expression. The Renaissance was characterized by growth and creativity output across literature, music, visual arts, theater, and yeah. African Americans were also explored, such theme as racial pride and identity and social justices, heritage and life as well, by how they lived and yeah, how they used that. So this image is specifically by one of the sources that I have listed on history.com, specifically the Harlem Renaissance one. It is Cootie Williams playing his trumpet in the Harlem Ballroom with Duke Ellington's band in the 1930s. I will explain who Duke Ellington is. But Cootie Williams basically in this area is basically like a nightclub where everyone is gathered by basically their love of jazz music and getting together and just playing around. Not playing around, but I mean there what's it called? Hootie Williams with Duke Ellington, the band. just enjoying jazz music altogether as a whole. Like, you could see this guy right here too. Like, he's enjoying it. So, how jazz expanded throughout Harlem. Jazz expanded throughout Harlem during the Renaissance era because of various factors. So, one, like I said, being the Great Migration, as the hundreds of African Americans like moved to Harlem, they also brought their like vibrant musical traditions and like as well as their, cultural expressions, establishments, and yeah, they basically applied their musical love and musical traditions to like businesses. So the Cotton Club, the Apollo Theater, the Alhambra, I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. The Alhambra Ballroom and the Smalls Paradise became basically just a lot of people just gathered there for jazz performances, specifically showcasing the legendary like musicians. Um, and I'll explain that later. The jazz basically had provided a powerful voice for African Americans' identity, pride, and resilience, challenging basically racial stereotypes, and also like expanding throughout African Americans um in Harlem's town. So yeah. How jazz became significant. Overall, like I said, there were many musicians, writers, artists, etc., that used jazz as a form of expressing themselves culturally in a way that the poems that some African Americans made, like Claude McKay, I believe he wrote, oh, there was this one poem I can't remember. I think it was like I can't remember off the top of my head, but he had written a poem that a lot of people really did like, and I should remember this. I knew this, but I completely forgot. It's like I'm blanking out. I know what it is, but I'm blanking out. So, but yeah, like in that way, not just basically in poems, African Americans use that form of speech to express their culture and connect what experiences they have gone through themselves. And so just with that, and not just that as well, like just with jazz music, there are specific jazz songs that do stand out that also connect with like experiences with what they have gone through as well. Um so since majority of the population of African Americans all throughout jazz music, they that has served as like a safe space. So clubs would gather jazz musicians and they would bring communities together like as a whole. So yeah. Some famous musicians during the Harlem Renaissance. Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes is a pretty big one. So he's famous for like jazz poetry and becoming like, excuse me, becoming basically like the picture of like jazz in a way. Another like ideal image that you can think of is when you hear like the Harlem Renaissance. Like you can probably think of jazz. And you can probably think of Duke Ellington, like I said in the picture beforehand. He had an orchestra, so basically a band that was the one of the first to create like the jazz music that he has like, that he has made. He had made orchestral jazz and he also performed in the Cotton Club very regularly. Like he was one of the regulars to perform there. And also as well as many other clubs, but specifically the Cotton Club was one of the main clubs that he had went to and performed. Another image that you may think of is Louis Armstrong. So he was mainly the person to define jazz in a way. So he was another big image that a lot of people really thought of when they were hearing like jazz music and especially like the Harlem Renaissance. So he like I said just a big picture of that and also he had influenced a lot of others to make jazz music themselves. So, yeah. So, Claude McKay and Home to Harlem. So, this book was one of the books that Claude McKay had published in 1928 is significantly relates to the Harlem Renaissance because of like the major events that happened throughout this book. So the main character, Jake, he tries to find his place back in Harlem, New York, as a Black African American, um, after coming from his post in Europe. So because of due to Harlem's social life and events that were going on during that time, he had quite a difficult time adjusting to everything, but he found it pretty like he found it harder to find his identity as a person. But and he made many mistakes during due to that. Specifically one event where he had encounter a cabaret dancer. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but that basically performs to jazz music. So due to that, the vibrant lights and everything around him, that was like something that was initiating him like, as a person like identifying himself like, oh, I like jazz music and I like the girl that's dancing to the jazz music. He did have like a love thing for her. Didn't end well. But yeah, so it was a way to express like the culture that he had basically accustomed to. He had grown like accustomed to over time, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah. So in conclusion, throughout the years, jazz music has evolved in its influence in music and culture, even beyond Harlem, the Harlem Renaissance. So during that evolution, it has proved like over time that it has brought people together with their experiences and customs, especially Langston Hughes, Duke Ellington, and even Louis Armstrong. Um, they have influenced like a perspective in music and how it brings people together. So yeah, and these are my sources.